Hello again and welcome back to World News here on TVP World with me, Anna Kalczyńska. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that Poland will look at gaining access to nuclear weapons, as well as introducing military training for all adult men, with the program expected to be ready by the end of the year. In recent comments, the Polish Prime Minister outlined plans to expand Poland's military, increasing the total number of troops, including reservists, from around 200,000 to 500,000. He stressed the need for large-scale military training for all adult men, reinforcing the country's defense capabilities. He also acknowledged that women may take part in military training, but noted that, in his words, quote, "War is still to a greater extent the domain of men," end of quote. Poland is already allocating 4.7% of its GDP to defense this year, the highest percentage among NATO members. Tusk suggested that this could increase further, saying defense spending should rise to 5%.
We have several models. One of the most appreciated is the Swiss model. I mean, it's not mandatory, but there are incentives that make men decide to do annual training, and it's not symbolic or to pretend.
Donald Tusk's proposal came just one day after European leaders backed plans to spend more on defense, an initiative they are calling Rearm Europe. Here's more on the topic from TVP World's defensive correspondent Marek Steele.
Plans that could provide as much as 800 billion euros to beef up the bloc's defense consist of unleashing the use of public funds for defense at the national level.
What's important is that the strong signal has been already sent that we need, as Europe, spend more on defense and we need new tools.
A new loan instrument will provide 150 billion euros in loans to member states, and more EU funds are to be directed towards defense-related investments.
Defense is something that the European Union did not do as part of the core business that it was also set up to do. So this is basically groundbreaking.
The money could go to many different areas within defense, but it seems that arms production will be central. The defense sector says it is ready for the challenge.
The European defence industry is fully able and ready to rapidly increase production further, deliver at pace and meet European needs as soon as orders are placed.
Poland hopes to secure billions of EU funds for its border reinforcement project called East Shield, which is aimed at slowing down a possible Russian invasion.
Russian airstrikes pounded the Donetsk region of Ukraine on Friday. The deadliest attack hit the town of Dobropillya, where at least 23 people were killed and 30 injured. According to local authorities, the death toll could still rise as people may be trapped under the rubble. 8 apartment buildings have been damaged. First responders have been dispatched to the scene and rescue operations continue. Russia has increased the intensity of its air offensive over the last 2 weeks, repeatedly striking various parts of Ukraine and killing dozens of civilians. On Thursday, US President Donald Trump made the decision to stop sharing military intelligence with Ukraine, sparking concerns that Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities may now come without prior warning. The mineral deal that the Trump administration is forcing on Ukraine is not as exploitative as it is being painted in the media, according to Cordelia Buchanan-Ponczek, a research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. During a recent interview on TVP World, Ponczek spoke at length about the specifics of the deal, stressing that Ukraine would retain full ownership of the minerals under the agreement.
People have been using the deal word very much not with context. It's a memorandum of understanding, which means that it's not legally binding. It's a statement of intent. And what the statement of intent is essentially to establish a fund. And this would be an investment fund for the reconstruction of Ukraine. And so the deal, the Memorandum of Understanding, stipulates that as Ukraine has these assets, these natural resources that can be monetized, that 50% of the profits from the monetization of those assets, they'll be put into this fund. And then that fund is going to be used to invest reconstruction and development of Ukraine. Another really important part of this deal that I want to highlight is this is not just minerals. Surely Ukraine has critical raw materials, and we can talk about that, but it also includes oil and gas, traditional hydrocarbons, and it includes infrastructure. This is port infrastructure and LNG terminals, for example. And aside that, it doesn't include the current state-owned assets of Ukraine, so something like Naftogaz. So the way that I see this, it has really been portrayed as an exploitation of Ukraine. But Ukraine itself stated that actually it will retain full ownership of the minerals.
In his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reaffirmed the country's commitment to restoring peace. He highlighted ongoing diplomatic and military efforts to defend Ukraine's sovereignty. Zelensky also provided an update on securing international financial support, including funding from European Union countries.
This week, we significantly increased European support, both at the EU level and from individual countries. Norway has made a particularly strong decision to increase its funding for Ukraine's resilience. The announced aid level for this year has been raised to $7.7 billion, with the majority allocated for weapons production in Ukraine. This will be of great help. Thank you. We are also awaiting decisions from other northern European countries. France will accelerate its security assistance. The Netherlands is prepared to invest 700 million euros in drone production. New commitments from our Baltic friends have been made to support Ukraine. Strong security agreements have been reached with European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. We are preparing for a meeting of top military commanders in France. We continue working with our partners who seek peace just as much as we do, on concrete steps toward that goal. Next week will be extremely busy in Europe, the United States and Saudi Arabia, where we are preparing a summit to accelerate peace and strengthen security foundations.
Piotr Strach, Vice President of Poland's National Defense Committee, says the U.S. has halted aid deliveries to Ukraine that were passing through Rzeszów airport. He confirmed that the aid pause had already been announced and is now being implemented.
It seems to me that the US government has blocked not only aid leaving the Rzeszów airport, but simply all aid to Ukraine. The aid stationed in Rzeszów is the property of the US government, so it is actually the Americans who decide. It was announced that they would pause the aid, and now they're implementing this decision. We hope that this aid would be unblocked quickly. Unfortunately, the negotiations between the US and Ukraine are still ongoing, but I am hopeful that they will come to an agreement soon, and the aid deliveries will be resumed.
The phrase, if you want peace, prepare for war, is more relevant than ever, according to Darius Hauniškis, head of Lithuania's State Security Department. He also suggested that traditional diplomacy is unlikely to be effective with Russia.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us prepare. Let us prepare and be ready for the worst. I will repeat myself. Today, the phrase, if you want peace, prepare for war, has become especially relevant. Russia will perhaps not focus on diplomacy in this case, but sheer brute force, seeking to seize as much territory as possible, or even to occupy the entirety of Ukraine, claiming to simply be protecting itself from the NATO threat. We are simply saying that the diplomacy that we in the Western world believe in, democracy and diplomacy, does not work vis-à-vis with Russia. It is already at war, and they already imagine to be fighting NATO and say this openly everywhere, to their society and public. So we are saying that Russia can only be defeated perhaps by military means, not diplomacy.
Slovakians took to the street on Friday to protest their government's increasingly anti-Ukraine and pro-Moscow rhetoric. They called for 3 rebel members of parliament to fully abandon the coalition, which could result in the fall of the ruling coalition. Thousands gathered in 50 cities across the country, with around 10,000 protesters. Several were arrested. They voiced their anger over Prime Minister Robert Fico's friendly approach to the Kremlin. Fico visited Russia leader Vladimir Putin at the beginning of the year after Ukraine refused to extend transit contracts for Russian gas flowing through Ukrainian territory. Fico's government has been under pressure not only on the streets but in parliament as well. Defections saw his coalition lose its majority on paper. However, the defectors have so far refused to join any vote of no confidence. Protests in Greece as well led to riots in the capital city of Athens. Thousands had gathered ahead of a no-confidence vote over a deadly 2023 train collision. Protesters clashed with riot police and Molotov cocktails and fireworks exploded in the streets. It is the third protest in a week against the centre-right government. The protesters are holding politicians responsible for the disaster that saw 57 people killed 2 years ago. Two trains collided head-on near the city of Larissa in the tragedy. Most of the victims were students. While rail officials have been charged for the accident, no politicians have been held accountable for what the protesters see as years-long negligence of the country's infrastructure. And Krystyna Skarbek, one of Poland's most remarkable World War II spies, is now the focus of Vesper, the musical, a new production at the Białystok Opera House. Her story, filled with courage and intrigue, is being brought to the scene in a performance that explores the wartime missions and legacy. Karolina Szapland has more.
It's astounding that nobody thought about this before, to bring a story of Krystyna Skarbek either to silver screen or to a musical. But finally the wait is over, because Churchill's favourite spy, Krystyna Skarbek, who inspired Vesper Lind for James Bond, her life story was brought to life here in Białystok in Poland. The main star of the musical, Ewa Łobaczewska, tells us more.
Telling the story in the musical, we are actually telling a story about all the heroines in the history of the Second World War, and not only who were just forgotten and we will never know their names. So she is, for me personally, she is a symbol of all the women that fight for our freedom, and just for all the women.
A famous legend, a trumpet player, but in this case, a writer of this musical, Gary Goodman, told us quite unexpectedly that his wife was also an inspiration for this story.
My wife understood about the inner character of this woman, so Małgosia was my muse. This musical was meant to be. It's important. Krystyna Skarbek is an important, iconic woman in Polish history, once forgotten, but now will be remembered.
The awe-inspiring but ultimately tragic story of Krystyna Skarbek will play here in Opera Podlaska on stage for many more times. However, one would hope that it will travel further beyond Poland and be seen across the world. I'm Karolina Szapland for TVP World.
That's interesting and worth going and seeing. Białystok is waiting in the Opera House. Krystyna Skarbek. Well, that's it in this edition of World News, but please stay tuned to TVP World for more.